You're listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk. Number 516.
Hello and welcome back to the Outdoors Station and another fascinating conversation. This time with Camile Mateos, who is about to set off on the 2,650-mile Pacific Crest Trail. Looking back into the 15-year Outdoor Station library, I can see we've discussed the PCT in detail probably about half a dozen times with guests. However, this was way back in 2006. And we've only given it cursory notice since. So this is a great opportunity to freshen up the information and look at tackling the PCT from the perspective of someone in the UK who is hitting the trail as light as possible with everything she's learned from her research on the internet, from talking to others, and her 3 years hiking experience. Yes, Camile, who describes herself as a plus-size hiker, talks quite openly about the gradual building up of her experience, her self-confidence, and her abilities over those 3 years of hitting various UK trails and what she's learned along the way. She also shares how she's approached the financial and time aspect of preparing for this challenge and what sacrifices she's had to make this long-distance hiking dream come true. Plus, we dip into her 35-litre pack, yes, 35-litre pack, to see what she's taking with her on her journey. But first, how did Camile, originally from the Pyrenees, find herself living in God's country in Scotland? Of course, there's more information, links and images over on the outdoorstation.co.uk website, or you can check out more information on Camile's website herself, aptly named camhikesthepct.home.blog.
Yeah, so I've been in Scotland now for 13 years. I first came here right after high school. I was looking for somewhere to go, really pushed by my stepmom, but I was also quite keen to get out after high school and discover another country. So there was this person in our extended family that had a house here in Edinburgh, and coupled with that, the fact that Edinburgh had loads of festivals and I was really into arts and culture. So we decided I would go for 2 months, for the months of July and August, experience the festivals. And, 2 months became a year. I wanted to stay for a year to learn English. And then during that year, I found somewhere at uni, a course at uni that I wanted to join. So I did 4 years at uni, and within those 4 years, I started working in the cultural sector. And since then, I've graduated and kept on working within that sector. So yeah, it's been 13 years now.
And your stepmother hasn't seen you since?
Well, once a year. I make sure I fulfill my duties.
Your obligations.
Exactly.
So you're working for the Edinburgh Festival now, I understand. That must be a fun job.
Yeah, so we have 11 festivals in the city, and I work for the sort of umbrella organization that works with all of them. And I look after international projects. So I love it. It enables me to travel and meet with people from all over the world and, be a sort of ambassador for our festival city. And yeah, I've been doing this ever since, as part of different organizations, but I've been doing this ever since I graduated. And I love it.
Now, you grew up in the Pyrenees, which is obviously a well-known area for outdoor activities and outdoor life. Did you have much of a life there before you came to Scotland?
Yeah, so I was in the Pyrenees from birth up until the age of 12 when my parents divorced, and then I moved up to Bordeaux, so closer to the Atlantic coast. And, we didn't have a huge amount of, we didn't go hiking that often. I have, the odd picture where I'm in, a backpack and my dad is carrying me in the mountains. So that makes for a nice picture. But in reality, we didn't go out hiking that much. When I grew a bit older, maybe around 6 to 8 years old, I would go up to the mountains with my mom and my grandma. My grandma was always a keen hiker, We wouldn't go very far or very high, but I have memories of beautiful views and particular smells and sounds like the cowbells, and so that really stayed with me. But from the age of 13 up until, well, really 2 years ago, my relationship with hiking was pretty much, well, non-existent.
So, 2 years ago, you started hiking and taking advantage of the landscape and surroundings, obviously based in Edinburgh, which is wonderful. But the reason for this conversation and interview is really you stated that you're about to attempt the PCT in America, which is obviously 2,500 plus miles. So there's quite a big jump in a couple of years. And I'd like to explore the story with you, really, how you've got to that stage and built yourself up to it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It probably seems like a massive step to take. So I would go on the sort of odd weekend hike, maybe in the Pentlands, which are a regional park near Edinburgh. But it wasn't until April 2017 that I heard about the Pacific Crest Trail. I was with my boyfriend then in the Canary Islands, and we were hiking up this volcano on this little island just off the main coast. And he told me, he said, "Oh, did you hear about this trail in the US where you just go on for months at a time, 5-6 months, and you actually have to send yourself packages to, sustain yourself and have food and be able to survive in the wild." And that was a sort of light bulb moment in my head. And I started thinking, wow, there is a continuous footpath somewhere in the world where you can just go from A to B, well, in this case, from Mexico to Canada, and you actually are completely self-supported, and you have to, basically just use your own 2 feet to go from one place to the other over such a long distance. So that was a big moment. And then, that same day from the Airbnb room, I started looking into it, looked at some websites, and I just couldn't believe it. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to get somewhere like that anytime soon. In fact, I probably will never have a job that'll let me do this, or the right gap in my career to be able to do this. So I thought, okay, let's think a bit closer to home. Are there some long distance trails in Scotland? Because I just love the concept of long distance hiking rather than a day hike, and always aiming for a Munro, or, I'm not I call it summit obsessed. I'm not like that. So I very much, bought into the idea of long distance hikes. And that's where I started going on Walk Highlands and looking at all those long distance paths in Scotland. And I was just amazed that they existed. And my very first one was in July of that same year. I walked part of it. I'll tell you a bit about that. The West Island Way, so on the Isle of Bute, which is actually not that well known.
So that sounds like an interesting route. I've not heard of that one before. So do tell me a little story about how you got on there.
Yeah, so I just sort of gathered as much gear as I could, bought my first pair of trail runners and got to Mountain Warehouse and bought some basic gear for, quite a cheap price. And it was fairly light, but still heavy for my current standards. And then the two of us was my boyfriend went on to the Isle of Bute, took a ferry and started walking. So it's a path that I think it's about 50 kilometers. I'm sorry, you'll have to cope with my kilometers because I'm from France, so I don't do miles. And I did, it's kind of the classic story of, you launch yourself into this and you do everything wrong the first time round. So we carried a lot, we stayed in 2 different tents, camped right by the water, had loads of midges because it was July. And after the first night, so literally had done maybe 10 kilometers the first day, I tore some ligaments in my ankle. So my ankle blew up the size of a massive potato, and I had to do maybe, 10, 15 kilometers to the actual town on my sore ankle. And we camped that night in the local park, not even anywhere wild by any extent of the imagination, and then took the ferry the day after. So I actually didn't really hike the West Island Way, but that was my first sort of wild camping experience. and my first hiking injury. But it didn't deter me from doing more after that.
Which reminds me of my favourite saying at the moment is, what do you get when you don't get what you want? Experience.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And, people made fun of me because I came back to the office with a stick, and I was given a stick to walk with for a few weeks or a few days rather. And they all just kind of thought, well, what is this? You launch yourself into this, and here you are with an injury. Maybe it's not for you.
Okay, with that experience then under your belt, you went on to do the West Highland Way, which presumably was a bit more successful.
Yeah, West Highland Way was great, but also brought in quite a lot of lessons. First night, I slept, it was in September in Drimmen, and my sleeping bag was completely inadapted to the temperatures. So I think it was maybe a 15 degrees Celsius sleeping bag in September in the north of Scotland. So I had an awful night, the worst camping nights of ever, to date. And then after that, I decided to stay in a hostel. So I actually didn't wild camp on the West Highland Way, because after that night, I had to just find another solution. And then after the West Highland Way, I did loads of other long distance trails in Scotland, Great Glen Way, Speyside Way, Rob Roy Way, African Tail Way. I can continue on naming them.
So it sounds like you've got a lot of kilometres under your belt now. The next question has to be, as good as Mountain Warehouse is for getting people out there, and a lot of their equipment is getting very, very technical at the moment, which is good to see. You are now about to set off on the PCT, which is a world-renowned trail for lightweight backpackers, people that really have managed to strip their equipment down to a minimal list before they set off. So would you like to just go through all the sort of changes that you've made that are going to make this trail much more manageable and enjoyable for you?
Yeah. I guess the first thing is that I focused on what's commonly called the big three. So my backpack, my sleep system, and my tent. So my backpack was a Mountain Warehouse one for actually a long time, and I changed that last year. And actually I should mention that where Mountain Warehouse was a great help, but actually to really get lightweight gear, I had to go over to not go over to the US, but really focus my research on North American gear. There's some amazing manufacturers there and sort of cottage gear makers. So and also my backpack, I focused on a frameless pack. So my backpack is a Gossamer Gear, and I'm actually in conversation with them, probably gonna try the Kumo Gossamer Gear. So that's 36 liters instead of the 40 liters I had on previous hikes with the Gorilla Gossamer Gear. My tent is also Gossamer Gear. That's the one, so a single wall tent. Which has performed quite well in Scotland. In fact, I was a bit concerned about weather and winds, but it's been fine. And my sleeping pad, I'm currently testing a couple of sleeping pads. I've been really happy with the Thermarest Neo Air in terms of packability and how lightweight it is, but I find myself slipping to the sides quite often. I move a lot during the night, and also I sleep on my tummy. So I'm thinking about, I've already purchased a Thermarest Z-Lite, and I think I probably will go for that for the PCT. And then the last thing within my sort of big three items, and that is the single most expensive piece of gear I have, and that's my sleeping quilt. So I have a quilt rather than a sleeping bag because of weight considerations, but also it's quite good if you move around because it's attached to your sleeping mat. And also, and so the brand is Katabatic Gear, and they're based in Colorado. The bags are made from ethical feathers, and the ratings are actually really accurate compared to many other companies that have inaccurate ratings, I find.
That's a good list of fairly technical equipment, and the only thing that concerns me there is the Kumo is, as a 35-litre bag, is actually quite a small bag. So by the time you've got the equipment you've just mentioned in it, I'm not too sure you're going to have a vast amount of space left. So what else are you catering for as regards to clothes and the amount of days' food you're taking with you?
Well, so in terms of food, I think, the food carries really vary on the PCT, but the High Sierras section is probably the one where I have to look out for longer food carries and really give some more thinking to what type of food I'll carry. One thing that won't take very much space in my bag is my cook system, because I'm actually going stoveless. So I'm just taking a spoon and a container to cold soak my food, or just simply, wraps and, whatever other food I'll put in the wrap. In terms of the clothes, I'm still working on the clothes that I'll actually be wearing. I'm probably going to go for something like cycling shorts and a long sleeve top, like a shirt. And then I've also ordered recently an insulated jacket. So I'm going for synthetic rather than down, because of the humidity, particularly in Washington at the end of the trail. And I also want this jacket to be useful in Scotland. So I don't want to, ruin the feathers with humidity. Very, very few socks and underwear. I'll be washing quite a lot of things on the trail. And the rest is kept to a minimum, really. Oh, and also I should mention the water filtration and all of that, because one of the biggest challenges for me, I think, given that I'll have quite a small pack, is the longer water carries. So I think the more I'll have to carry at once will be 6 liters, which is quite a lot. So I have what I need to do that. Whether I'll be able to fit in the pack is something I need to work on from home before I go.
That's exactly what I was thinking, actually. I know there's a section or two there that you have to carry a lot of water with you, or you're advised to anyway. And what about bear canister? I think you have to carry a bear canister at one stage, don't you?
Yeah, in the Sierra, I'll have to carry a bear canister, so I'll probably fit that. All the Gossamer gear packs, I know you're familiar with them, have the 2 adjustable straps at the top, so it'll just fit kind of outside the bag, but strapped with the top straps. And I'm actually, this is something I want to mention in case anyone is wanting to hike this trail. I'm actually not buying the bear canister, I'm hiring it. So it's significantly cheaper. And since I'll be going back to Scotland, where, as far as I know, we don't have any bears, then I don't have to make an extra expense and have yet another thing that I'll have to keep hold of.
You're listening to theoutdoorstation.co.uk. Award-winning producers of podcasts to inform, inspire and entertain lovers of the great outdoors everywhere.
Now, what about the usual problem that most people face when they go to do the PCT or any of the American trails, when setting out from this country, of course, is food products and sending food abroad or to ahead of your trail? Because I know they won't accept meat-based products if you're non-veggie, of course, meat-based products in, and I'm also curious to what your diet's going to consist of if you're going stoveless.
Yeah, so I don't eat meat, but I will probably eat fish, like, tuna, that sort of thing. I'm not going to bring any food from the UK, so I'll be buying all the food over in the US. And there's a few types of strategies in terms of resupply, food resupply. I'm not planning on sending myself boxes in advance all the way along. So what I'll be doing is I'll be sending myself boxes from the trail. I don't want to go into a huge amount of planning. I want to stay really humble about how far I'll be able to get. So I'll just keep going, keep sending boxes as I go along, as I find out a bit more about my pace. In terms of the type of food that I'll probably be eating, things like couscous, rice, mashed potatoes, topped up with things like olive oil and cheese and different types of seasoning. And then for breakfast and snacks, bars, maybe the luxury fresh fruit and vegetable on the day where I'll be leaving town. So things like avocados carried in Pringle cans so that they don't get completely mashed up, and crisps, and yeah, that sort of thing. I guess the staple thing will be things like couscous, mashed potatoes, rice, or even things like ramen, and then adding stuff on top of it, basically.
Yeah, from what I've learned from speaking to people and blogs that I've read, everybody starts with quite nutritional aspirations, but very soon they get down to having packets and packets of Pop-Tarts and eating those continually as they go along, pure sugar and getting a hit. I like the idea about buying the products in a trailhead when you get to a town and sending it ahead of yourself. That obviously you can recognise what your own pace is going to be then, which I think is quite a good idea. But I do wonder if you've lived on that kind of diet for more than a few days and how it actually sits with you.
Yeah, so I've tried cold soaking for a few days and it worked all right. It worked fine. I learned that, couscous that's cold soaked on its own tastes really, really dry. So, packing things like hummus or some sort of moisture, basically, is good on top of it. I didn't cold soak, but I didn't have a stove either on the GR10 back in the Pyrenees last September. So I did everything, just, wraps and sort of different types of picnic stuff and fish, that sort of stuff. And it worked quite well. So based on those 12 days, that's what I'm planning on doing on the PCT.
Now, you've obviously done your research and I'm sure read lots of blogs about people who've done this and used different ways of food and resupply. I wonder, with your cold food idea or cold soaking idea, is there a massive financial saving as a matter of interest?
I'm not too sure. I don't, maybe not. I guess the fact that I won't have to worry about a gas, the resupply on gas attracts me, because I don't want to have to, send myself cans of, fuel when I'm going to somewhere remote. But I haven't seen anything come up in research about the relationship between price and having a stove or not.
And talking of price, this is obviously something you've had to calculate into your plans as well. There's obviously various things involved here, not only the actual doing the trip itself and what it may cost you, but obviously what you're leaving behind as regards running a house or a room or whatever it is where you're living at the moment, and getting time off work. So let's just go back for a second. How have you got time off work? Because I think that's probably the biggest challenge most people would face.
Yeah. It's been a sort of a very long thought process, and to be very honest with you, I think you don't commit to hiking the PCT unless you're absolutely passionate about it. So I find myself thinking that perhaps if I hadn't had the time off from work, I probably would have gone anyway, because you sort of start obsessing over it for me for a couple of years, and it's sort of is that or nothing type of thing. But all of that being said, I've been incredibly lucky that, once I got my permit and once I got my visa, my director, my boss, was extremely open to the conversation. So basically just asked her to have a chat and floated the idea of going on a sabbatical for 6 months. I work part-time half of the month and part-time and full-time the other half of the month. And inconveniently, this falls onto the busy months because, of course, our peak festival season in Edinburgh is August and the rest of the summer. So, but all of that being said, the 6 months I've asked for, so mid-April to mid-October, are the perfect time for a freelancer or someone else to come and cover for me. They're not sort of odd months to find cover. So, she sort of appreciated that this would be a great personal development opportunity, and also would give me time to reflect on, on myself, on my current situation. I'm just sort of coming out of a breakup after a very long-term relationship. And also, in terms of my professional career, I've worked for a different organization since I graduated, but always on the same project every year. So this would have been my 10th year working on the same project. And although I'm extremely passionate about it, I think I need a summer to step back and kind of be away from the festivals and kind of maybe realize how much I love it, to be back refreshed.
Yeah, I certainly think the whole experience will give you a fresh perspective on life generally, and it'll be interesting to see what develops as a result of it. But coming back to the cost element, if you don't mind, have you actually costed out sort of the various sections, how much the actual trip might cost you, and any other additional costs for anybody else that's considering it? Yeah,
absolutely. So I set off with the aim back in January 2018 to save £10,000, by the time I have to leave this April. And so I managed to save up for that. So I've got £10,000 saved up, and there's different ways this will be broken down. On the trail, I'm actually estimating, it's quite a large estimation, but that I'll be spending £1,000 per month. So £6,000 for the trail itself, and that includes new gear, so things like new pairs of shoes and any gear repairs or changes, whatever. But then the rest of the money, so the other £4,000, that very much goes towards keeping expenses back at home running. So I'm unsure right now as to whether I'll be subletting my flat. That's something that I'm exploring. I feel a bit funny about sort of letting someone else into my space, but just because of the costs associated with it, I probably will have to do that. And then I've also been, you don't save £10,000, especially on a part-time contract half of the year, just like that. It's taken a lot of strategizing around, how to save and cutting down on, subscriptions, memberships, and less going out, and, being really careful about my savings, basically.
And so, as part of that £1,000 a month, does that include the permit and any insurances, or is that on top of that?
So the insurance is not part of the £6,000. I'm hoping to cover this from the £4,000 left over.
Sort of how much money were you talking about for insurance to do this then?
We're talking about just over £400.
Okay, and that covers you for the whole 6 months? Yeah. And is that a specific insurance for the PCT, or is that one that you just picked up as a travel insurance?
Yeah, it's the latter. So it's a company called World Nomads that's been used by loads of international hikers on the PCT and other trails. And just based on someone's experience from Scotland, actually, who was on the PCT this year, she actually had some health issues and said that the insurance company was amazing and was really helpful. So that's what I'm planning to go with.
And how much was the permit? Is that very expensive?
No, the permit is free. And then you get an option to donate to the Pacific Crest Trail Association, which I did, and I would encourage everyone to do that because, I don't live in the US, so I can't very easily give back to the trail. So you can make a donation, but the permit is free. The other cost to bear in mind is the cost of the visa. As an international hiker, you've got to get what's called a B2 visa from the US Embassy. And so, that's $160. So what's that? Over £100. And then I had to go to London. So, the travel to London and one night accommodation or whatever. Maybe you can stay with friends. So that was another thing also to bear in mind.
Okay. So in actual fact, really then, sort of permits and insurances all in for, well, let's say less than £1,000, and possibly really less than £1,000 for a lot of the equipment. Most people would have, I think, some of the items that you've mentioned or something very similar. So less than £1,000 really you can set off, and it's just the actual living costs while you're on the trail itself, I guess.
Yeah, per month. Yeah, £1,000 per month. I think that's quite a generous estimate, but I'd rather be on that side rather than have to get off the trail for financial reasons.
I can imagine you living like a queen as you go along and top hotels.
We'll see.
Just to save weight, you use all the exotic products. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. I think a reward in a trail in a town every now and then is good to keep your motivation going, for sure.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
then I also hear that your hunger grows and grows as the trail progresses. So I also need to make sure to factor in the different restaurants.
I know you've done lots of research. I'm sure you've done lots of research. Have you actually spoken to anybody who's recently returned, and have they given you any tips or any thoughts that you hadn't really considered?
Yeah, I've talked to a few people. So, it was just pure luck. But there's been a couple of people that have been here in Scotland, visited Scotland, and that I've been able to spend a bit of time with. So someone called Twinkle, Stephen Shattuck, he's hiked many trails in the US, including the PCT. So we spent a bit of time with him when he was here with his wife. And also someone called Peanut, that's his trail name. His name is Andrew Glenn, and he's a very accomplished hiker. He's just hiked this year from Mexico to, basically the Continental Divide Trail and the Great Divide Trail, which makes up for just this massive trail. And he stayed with me when he was here in Edinburgh, and we spoke at length about the PCT. And I think in terms of advice, a lot of the stuff that comes back is, don't plan too much. Just there's only so much you can plan. The rest you'll have to figure out on the trail. Your expectations are a certain type, but actually the trail will decide, and you can fight whatever is thrown in your way once you're there. And also just there's, I attached a lot of importance up until a certain time to my physical abilities and me doubting them. As a plus-size hiker, I've been often in doubting, my abilities. But actually, a lot of what comes back is that the hardest aspect of a trail like this is the mental aspect. So I've been working on that as well.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. I was just thinking of one of my previous interviews, which you may have listened to, where she said exactly the same thing. It's people ask about the distances and the mileage and hows and the sort of day-to-day things, but actually the toughest part was the mental part to get up and keep going each day. Enjoying the ride. There is a couple of other questions I wanted to ask you. You sort of glossed over them, but I'm sure you've got it to hand. You mentioned changes of footwear. What footwear are you using? Are you using approach shoes or boots? And are you just going to see what you can find as you go along as you wear these things out? And also the other question was hiking poles, which I assume you must be using.
Yeah. Yes, hiking poles. Love them. I started working with hiking poles even since, the West Island Way, and I'll never hike without them. Whenever I forget them, I can't go very far. So yes, and I don't care if people judge you and think that it's only for old people. People need to get hiking poles into their gear list. In terms of the shoes, I use trail runners. So I started with Salomon trail runners, which I was very happy with, but I found that they didn't dry fast enough for my liking, and that meant that I developed some blisters, on days after river crossings and things like that. So now I'm using Altra's Lone Peak 4.0. Which is not a very original choice, because most hikers in the US on long trails use these, and there's a reason for that. So for now, I'm happy with these, and I think maybe later down the line, I might find that I need a bit more cushion, so I might swap for another type of Ultras. But this is what I use, and I also use this in Scotland. I think that's some people find it a bit odd or controversial, particularly, when it's raining or it's been snowing, but they've never failed me. And there's a very good reason why I use non-waterproof shoes. And I think there needs to be a bit more open-mindedness about, what's great about trail runners.
Well, absolutely. I'm in the same camp as you. I've not worn a waterproof shoe for a very long time, and I feel unsafe in boots these days. I must actually do a podcast and have a big argument with both sides of the fence as regards people who are pro approach shoes and pro boots. It's another story entirely, another interview entirely. Are you taking any technical gear, any social media gear, cameras, phones, solar chargers, MP3 players, that type of thing that sort of fill the pack up with odd bits and bobs and cables and leads?
The short answer is no. It's very, very simple. I'm just going to take my phone and take pictures with that. And if I want to film a bit, then I'll be filming with my phone as well. So yeah, my phone is the main thing, and I'll be recharging it with a portable battery, not a solo charger, because again, I try to buy my gear with the long term in mind, and I don't think that in Scotland they would work so well. So I'm going for a battery, and I'm gonna get one. Well, I've got one that's an Anchor one, and it's 20,000, whatever the name of the unit is. Milliamp hours. Thank you.
Which is 20,000 is quite a juicy battery, so that should keep you going for a bit. And what about backing up your photographs or videos? Because obviously over a 6-month period, you could easily fill an average-sized phone. Are you able to download that or put it on the cloud or do something with it?
Yeah, I've got an iCloud membership, so usually my phones just get uploaded. My photos get uploaded automatically onto it. So, I imagine I won't run out of space in between towns. So whenever I'm in town and I pick up Wi-Fi, then the photos can just upload as I go.
Well, fantastic. It sounds like you've got everything completely sorted and full of enthusiasm and joy, which is good. And now you've got quite a few trails under your belt. You're obviously settled into this. And when you look back now at your first journey when you did your West Isle Way, what advice would you have given yourself?
What advice? That's an interesting question. I think it's less to do with practical advice and more to do with reassuring myself about the perception I have about my own abilities. I think that, I have to trust myself more. I certainly do that more now, and I don't compare myself to others as much. I still do, like all of us, but I try to sort of, stop, not look too much at the kilometers or the elevation gain, and just kind of keep on putting one foot in front of the other, and eventually, I get to where I need to get. I've over the past couple of years, I also, I would film a lot and upload stuff on YouTube and, document a lot. And in recent months and weeks, I've tried to rein that in a little and film a bit less and try to just be within the hike a bit more and care a bit less about sharing as much as I used to. So that's something I'll be continuing on the PCT. So I think originally when I imagined the hike, it was very much going to be, something that would then generate loads of episodes and that sort of thing. But I'm not planning on doing that so much anymore. So I'll probably do, maybe 5 episodes, one for each section of the trail, the big 5 sections. And keep it to that, really, because I really want to. I think it's a once in a lifetime experience, and I really want to enjoy it.
Well, I certainly agree with you there. I would love to do the PCT. I think it's. I'm very envious of you at the moment. I just wonder if you'd promise me one thing.
Yeah.
Would you tell me all about it when you come back and share your story?
Yeah, with pleasure. That'd be my pleasure. Absolutely. Loads of lessons to share, I'm sure.
It sounds to me that Cam has prepared herself really well for this adventure, and I look forward to talking with her again, either during or after, to see how her choices of gear, food and clothing have all worked out. My thanks to her for bringing us up to date with all the current information and some of the costs involved. I'm also hoping to chat with another guest soon who is also setting off this year on the PCT, so maybe their paths will cross during those 2,650 miles. Who knows? We'll find out later, I'm sure. I do hope this podcast has earned the privilege of your time. Until next time, folks, why not buy a tent, camp in the woods, and keep away from the coronavirus? And bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear or see more from our extensive free library, please visit theoutdoorstation.co.uk.